How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Welcome back. It's me and Dr. Joe, also known as I Am Dr. Joe, here live on WATD 95.9 FM.
Nice, Mark. Yeah, we're trying to figure out what the name of the show should be, you know, because we've gone from the Dr. Joe Show, me and Dr. Joe, you and Dr. Joe.
I don't remember you and Dr. Joe.
I just made that one up.
Yeah.
And then I Am Dr. Joe. I don't know.
I Am Dr. Joe's interesting. It will make it really hard for the intro, though. So here I am. Welcome to I Am Dr. Joe.
Right.
And people will be like, you're not Dr. Joe.
You're
You
right.
don't sound like him.
No, you're right.
You look like him, but you don't sound like him.
Yeah, we'll work on that. But audience, you know, if you've got a thought about what the show should be called.
I do like the concept of I Am Dr. Joe.
Yeah.
Like the I Am approach.
Right.
I Am Dr. Joe. But then you have to do the intro.
I don't know, but you're so good at that. You know? You are. You've been doing it for years. And each time it's different, and each time it's novel, and each time it's great.
Yeah.
You know? But with that in mind, speaking of novel and great, we're going to have an incredible guest later on.
Yes.
I know that she's waiting, Carol Odell. I can't wait to chat with her. But first, we're going to follow up on what the audience may just have heard on Veterans Voice. So, Mark, can you do us the honors, please?
Yeah, we have two amazing guests here in studio, two local high school students who have together started a really impactful club, very inspiring in their local community to help raise awareness and gratitude for our local veterans. And I'd like to introduce Ryan Lucetti and Tim Stiles of Marshfield High School. So
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Tim Stiles is similar last...
Same last name.
Is there a connection there?
Yeah. There is.
Yeah.
This is my youngest of three, and I'm super proud.
Yeah. And it is incredible having you guys here. How did you get this idea? Can you tell folks a little bit about what you're doing and what the mission is?
Yeah, thank you. So myself and Timmy, around maybe April of last year, we decided we wanted to get involved more with the veteran community. My family's full of veterans, and I know Timmy's very passionate about it as well. So we really wanted to do something that really made a impactful impact for the veterans in Marshfield. So we decided to start this club with our advisor, Mr. Grelland, and he's been amazing help. What
is the name of the club?
Stars and Stripes Club.
Stars and Stripes Club.
Correct.
Okay.
And, I mean, we've had great success so far. We've done fall cleanups. We're planning to do spring cleanups. And as talked in the previous show, we're doing a Vietnam War speaking event that I'm sure Timmy is able to expand a little bit more on.
Yeah, so on March 12th, next week, Wednesday, me and Ryan will be hosting an event at the Marshfield High School Auditorium. It's going to include 4 Vietnam veterans, and they're going to speak for about an hour on their experiences of the Vietnam War and what they went through at the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's going to be emceed by our local teacher, Hall of Fame teacher, Steve Weisgerber, who's been on the Dr. Joe Show.
Yep.
Or me and Dr. Joe. He's also going to be riding in his 40th Pan Mass Challenge this year.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's going to be a great host of the event that these folks have put together to, again, you know, as Justin said on Veterans Voice, right? History is lost when folks don't tell their stories. So they're going to allow some folks to share their stories so that we can learn from them.
So, I mean, you're going to encourage them to tell these stories because we have this interesting vernacular. We say, we're going to allow them to do this. That's so silly. Think about it. It's not up to us to allow someone. These guys have remarkable stories. How are you going to manage that? There may be some pretty intense things that they talk about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the number one thing that we're looking to focus on, because we're looking to do many of these in the future, because like was said previously on Veterans Voice, and like we just said now, if veterans are not telling their stories, then history is truly lost, because those are the stories that should be told, and that's what we need to, and that's what we learn from in history. I think the number one thing for us is to make sure that they're comfortable and willing to share these stories, and to make sure that, you know, they're as comfortable as possible when doing this, because we understand that, you know, because at the end of the day, war is brutal, and we understand that, so we're looking to make this the best experience as possible for them.
Yeah. You know, I'm personally very grateful for this, because those folks coming back from Vietnam were not treated well by our country. It was not their fault. But boy, there was so much animosity towards them, and all they were doing was trying to protect our country.
Yeah.
You know? Do you think that will come up?
I mean, I'd like to add that into the program. I don't know how many of them will feel comfortable about talking about it, but some of them said they would be okay with speaking about that, like when they came home from the war and how they were treated by other people.
Yeah, I would be really interested in not just obviously their experience there, but what was it like to come back here, home?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
you know. And then people saying you did something wrong. It wasn't their fault.
It was not their fault, no.
You expect to be celebrated for your service and
yes,
honored, and you're spat in the face.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And that, to me, is something that, you know, as historians, we need to learn from so we never repeat.
And I think we have.
Yeah.
I think that we have had a much deeper understanding and appreciation. And, you know, the show right before us, you know, with Greg and Veterans Voice is clearly an indication. But their show is saying that these folks are still at high risk for suicide, that they're so overwhelmed and not supported sometimes. So I think what you're doing, giving them this voice, you know, offering this opportunity for them to talk with strangers about what happened. I'm just curious, how did you guys come up with this idea?
For the speaking event or for the club in general?
Let's go to the club.
I mean, I've always been passionate about veterans, and my dad was in the Marine Corps. My grandfather was also in the Marine Corps, and he served in Vietnam. My other grandfather was a motor sergeant in the Army. So my family's all been in the military, and and, you know, I've had my experience being around all of them. Some people talk about it a little more than not. My grandfather, unfortunately, passed away from cancer when I was younger, so I wasn't really able to hear much of his story from his experiences in Vietnam. But, you know, being able to give back, especially having family members, I'd like to be able to help people out as much as possible, because, like we said earlier, I know that it's not easy for everybody. War is brutal, so I'd like to be able to make that experience and, you know, their lives a little bit easier by helping them out, whether it's cleaning their lawn, serving them dinners. You know, at the end of the day, it's all small stuff, but it adds up to, you know, because it adds up to make their lives a little bit easier.
I mean, no matter what we do, though, it won't compare to the sacrifice that they gave
100%.
to the country.
Yeah.
Right. But those small changes can have big effects, and the acknowledgement is powerful. How did you select these particular people? There are many you could have chosen.
So we worked with the Veterans Affairs at the town hall. There are these two women that are very helpful, and they basically found the four that would be best suitable for our event. They're 4 veterans, and they all just want to share their experience, and they're not like quiet. They have like a very wide range group of Vietnam veterans. Some will talk a lot, some won't, and she picked the best 4 for us, which is great.
Yeah. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Karen Paulette and Lisa Potts. I mean, they've done a wonderful job. We work with them very closely, especially with our club, and they've been very vital in helping us, you know, give back to the veteran community. They've always been very helpful. And, you know, I couldn't see 2 better people to do this job. They do a wonderful job.
Well, Ryan and Timmy, I'm so honored that you've come to share this with us. Tell us quickly again, the event, where is it? How can people find it?
Yeah, so it's going to be at 7 p.m. at the Marshfield High School Auditorium on March 12th. next Wednesday. It's going to be a free event, so there's no admission to get in, and it's pretty much going to be an hour, and exactly what we said, it's going to talk about their experiences, and they're going to speak, and then at the end, if anyone has any questions, they can go up and have personal conversations with them for about 20 minutes after.
Great.
Yeah.
We would love to have them here as well. So
Sure.
if you want to extend that invitation from us, we can find a Thursday evening and have them live in studio. We'd be honored.
Yeah.
So
Make sure to get that across. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for doing this. It's incredible what you're doing, and there are too many wars still going on, too many battles that still are being fought. But one battle that we do not have is getting sponsors. And so with that in mind, we will hear from our sponsors. Ryan and Timmy, thank you so much for coming in and doing this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, folks, thank you for listening to the Dr. Joe Show. We've been investigating whether or not we want to bring sponsors into our podcast. What are your thoughts? Do you know somebody who might be a good partner with the Dr. Joe Show, who may want to align their product or service with the Dr. Joe Show? Think about it.
And we are back right here on WATD 95.9 FM, live in studio, broadcast house.
Yeah.
Me and Dr. Joe.
Yep.
I am
Dr. Joe. I don't know. But I'm just curious, before we bring in our guest, what was that like for you to have your son here who's doing such remarkable stuff with his friend Ryan?
Love it. Makes me super proud. It's, one of the things that I love so much about this community is that they immerse themselves in this charitable activity, right? So it's such a giving community, and I often think, how do people learn things? Well, they have to be taught, right? People aren't innately, naturally charitable. So they have to be either shown or taught, and it's in the community, and these guys get inspired, and they think, and they say, well, why not? Maybe we can. Why don't we do this? We can do fall cleanups for these folks who have done so much for us. Yeah. And I went and visited a couple times when they were doing these fall cleanups, and, it's a crew of kids, and they're all organized, and they're having a good time, working, sweating, getting blisters on their hands. And you could see in them how impactful it is and how good they feel doing good for those people. And it's the contagion that we've talked about so much that, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Well, when you are giving of yourself to others like that, it is rewarding. We've spoken about that many times, and certainly, Mark, you are a leader in our community about that. You really are. The Shred Show. There are all these different things that you do to support others. Wouldn't it be nice if there were more people like that, as opposed to some folks who are so dark and who just want to take advantage and exploit others? And with that in mind, could you, Mark, introduce our guest for tonight?
With that in mind, our next guest grew up riding horses on the show jumping circuit in Virginia. She's been a practicing psychotherapist, facilitating groups and working with couples and individuals since 1984. Married for 38 years and the mother of a grown son, her other passions include squash, pickleball, partner dancing, mosaics, writing, hiking, traveling, and being in community with friends and family. She and her husband, Mark, currently split their time between Seattle and Cle Elum, Washington. She is the author of the book Groomed, a therapist's memoir of trauma. Please meet Carol Odell. Welcome to the show, Carol.
Welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you both.
Thanks.
And I just, I didn't mention this in my book, but my older half-brother fought in the Vietnam War as a Marine. And so I was able to listen in earlier and really appreciate that, what these students are doing and offering. And my brother didn't get a chance to tell his story. But this is why story sharing is so important. So thank you for this opportunity for me to share my story.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And very grateful that you're coming on the show, but this is a powerful story, Carol. I don't want to, be a spoiler and give it away, but how would you like to let the audience know about your book, Girl Groomed, when we can get it, but also how did you have the courage to write this?
It's my offering to people, just as I was saying, like, to share our stories helps each other not feel so alone. And instead of using a compilation of my client stories, I decided I wanted to share my own and, in a way, model that vulnerability that, that it does help. And I hopefully am offering a healing path through the trauma as well. So hopefully that's encouraging to others.
Yeah. It is certainly modeling that it is okay to talk about these things. And yet when in your book, as you're talking about them, you're also describing how it's bringing up memory after memory, more and more feelings, the anxiety, the sort of incredulity about how did this happen. Could you just give us and give our audience just a little snapshot of Girl Groomed?
Yes, it's my story of moving. My parents, my younger brother and I moved to rural Virginia, and just down the hill from our house, at that time when I was 10 years old, was horse stables. And I had always had this affinity to horses, even though I hadn't even been around a horse. There was something about horses that drew me in. And so I thought I had just arrived in paradise. Here's the stables just down the hill. I could have my own independence to run down there and ride and learn about caring for horses. However, the man who ran the stables was abusive, and he was sexually abusive to me and the other girls at the stables. And yet I loved him and admired him, and he was my mentor. And I think when we have these complicated feelings, we end up eliminating the difficult ones. And so I told myself a different story. We have difficulty, and so it's easier in a way to create these narratives of hey, it's not so bad, or I've got this, I'm handling it fine, it's not a problem. It becomes so, we become numb. I became numb to it, such that it was only the positive that I was letting in. But that narrative I created then ended up constricting me later on in my life.
In what way? How did it constrict you?
When I had to splinter off my connection with my feelings and wasn't sensitive to them, then it made me less sensitive to other people's feelings. And especially, I was a little less caring about what my husband was experiencing. And part of the outcome of that was that I also wanted to control things. I wanted to drive towards an outcome. I wanted to dictate. This was all kind of the coping with all the things that I was out of control of before. And that really jeopardized my marriage. I wasn't tracking what the mutuality of the partnership really could be, because the trauma was getting in the way, and it was creating reactivity in me.
Do you think you were, in retrospect, mirroring the person who had been abusing you?
In a certain way, his powerfulness, right? Again, I didn't want to feel helpless, and he embodied a power, domination, this is how it goes. And there was a way I think that I took that on that seemed, not consciously, but that was an easier, tolerable route than dealing with my own vulnerability at the time.
Yeah. There's a phrase in our business, denial is not just a river in Egypt, right? So there's a lot.
Yes.
So
and denial is a great coping mechanism, right? It's really brilliant in a way. It protects us, and yet then it ends up constricting us later on.
Yeah, I think the word coping actually is appropriate here. I prefer the word managing to coping, but sometimes there are things that we cannot even manage. We're just barely able to cope with them and hanging on with our fingernails. In the book, you take us through this remarkable story. I am curious, what was that like for you, having this catharsis? Was it catharsis to write it? Did you have doubts about it? I mean, what was that process like for you?
It was challenging to, like I said, I kind of fractured myself from the experience back when I was having it, and writing required me to literally write back into the pain of those scenes, and that was challenging, and yet it was also incredibly emotionally integrating. It really brought the pieces together. I was able to write my voice into it in ways that felt really very healing for me.
Go on.
I had to take some breaks now and then, right? That was good self-care, to take some breaks. My favorite kind of break is I would do kickboxing while watching professional tennis.
Kickboxing while watching professional tennis. Clearly, question mark. Clearly, there's a net gain in that.
Oh boy,
sorry. And a lot of love every now and then. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist this. I'm courting disaster.
Oh, you could have resisted.
Yeah,
you could have.
Yeah, I could have. I could have. Real quick, is the book out yet? Can people get it?
The book isn't out yet. It comes out on April 22nd.
Okay.
That's my launch date. People can pre-order it online right now, and I want to add that I'm giving proceeds from the book, a portion of those, to equine therapy and horse sanctuary organizations.
Yeah. We're going to talk more about that, but luckily Mark is reining me in when it comes to the bad puns. But I will not rein in our sponsors. So with that in mind, let's hear a shower from our sponsors without being rained.
Hey folks, welcome back. So any thoughts? Do you listen to other podcasts? Do you see how they do the sponsors? Is there a way that they're utilizing sponsors that you enjoy or you don't enjoy? I listen to SmartLess, and I really enjoy how the co-hosts share the voiceover for the product or service. It's really funny for the most part, but it's unique. It's them really endorsing. Does that work? What do you think?
And we are back. Me and Dr. Joe right here in studio WATD 95.9 with author Carol Odell. And right before the break, we started talking about equine therapy.
Yeah, equine therapy.
Equine therapy.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear more about
therapy.
that.
Yeah, tell us more about that, Carol, please.
It's such a powerful thing, and is really shown to that you kind of incorporating horses as co-therapists can be so helpful for, vets, for instance, others with PTSD, people that are struggling with all kinds of feeling othered. And it's one exercise that was very powerful is to be vulnerable to a horse choosing me. And so I was in this field, and I was just going to wait until horse came to me and chose me. And it's this moment of like, what if I don't get chosen? And what if I don't belong, don't feel belonging in this way? And then it's incredible that this horse came up to me. And that was just the beginning of an exercise. Another one that I was involved with was that I meditated in the middle of a horse ring with horses around me, and was instructed to just tune into their hearts. They're natural healers. And then it was just a very powerful moment where I fell into this very deep trance, and then they each in turn kind of came up to me, and I came up to them, and they had something to offer me, and a way to communicate with me that was quite profound. And the person that was facilitating this is talking about horses are innately herd animals. They're innately tuned into others, and they are very authentic in their responses. And so they met me in that moment, and it's incredible to be seen by these gorgeous animals.
Yeah, it's a powerful part of the book. It's towards the end of the book, and it was a remarkable experience that you were able to capture and describe. And yet there were these moments in the way you describe it that it was not easy, that there were old patterns of behavior that were still being imposed. Am I missing something there, or was that?
No, that's absolutely, that's exactly right. So another exercise was me trying to be in right leadership, and how to stand beside a horse and have the intention of moving, like I would be in leadership and they would be following. And it was really difficult for me to do, because the way I learned about training horses from this man who was very violent with his horses was about domination and fear. Yeah. And I didn't want to do that, and so I was kind of the opposite. I hesitated. I didn't want to, be in leadership. I was at the other end of that continuum. And so learning how to be in, well, as Brene Brown says, be in leadership with, not over, be power with, not over. And that the horses helped me with that.
And how do you translate then that experience into the work that you do as a therapist? I mean, you're offering with Girl Groomed a profound insight into yourself as a therapist, how you've managed, the trauma. How has that influenced the work that you do with patients?
The therapy that I've done on myself, and that is part of the chapters in the book where I toggle back and forth between the past riding horses and me being in therapy in the other chair. That has informed so much of my work with clients. And my husband and I did a lot of work together in our relationship, and we actually offered a group that we led for couples just from what we have learned about our relationship, and so it's a very personal thing for me, and not that I'm sharing my story with everyone, but it informs what I can give and what I'm seeing in others, because when I can see it more clearly in myself, I can see it more clearly in others. Mm-hmm. And see where we're stuck and see the obstacles and can better help them. So it's important to me, to continue to do this growth work. It's never over,
Yeah. No, it's not. And there's always something that we can learn about ourselves as long as we're willing to look. But so many people, the fear of what we're going to find, secrets aren't secrets because of what we've done. Secrets are secrets because we worry, how will someone judge me if I know my secret? But if you are terrified of your past, there's a great clip from Lion King, the movie The Lion King. My favorite clip. It's about a minute long, and it's when Rafiki and Simba are talking, and Simba says, I've got to go back, but that means I have to face my past. I've been running from it from so long. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Rafiki hits him on the head with his stick. And Simba said, "What'd you do that for?" He says, "What's it matter? It's in the past." And Simba says, "But it still hurts." And that, I tell you, I play that clip for my students, for people that I'm working with, because we run from our past. And that's what's so powerful, folks, about Girl Groomed, is Carol Odell is not running anymore. You know, she's not running from your past. I hope you appreciate really the remarkable strength and integrity that takes to share this story. What's it like for you that you know you're sharing this deeply personal story?
Thank you. It is breaking all these taboos. You know, not only like growing up at the barn, the stables, there was a taboo about talking about what was happening, right? We were all swimming in this abusive water, but nobody was talking about it. And then in my family, we didn't talk about difficult things. And then as my original training as a therapist, you were supposed to be a kind of a blank slate and not share much about yourself. So putting this all out there it's been a new stretch for me. And yet it's a good one in terms of what I'm wanting to offer for others beyond my clients. My clients will know the concepts and the ideas that I'm putting forth, and it will be now connected with my personal story. But for others, I hope that it offers some solace. And it's not, like you said, that there's pain about the past, but the past also does have its tentacles in our current. And to be able to see that and untangle that, that's where we have our agency. That's where we get our freedom to see our choices, where we're not just reacting, and where we can create that freedom for ourselves in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And really that's what the I Am approach is saying, that the home domain is powerful, but if you don't look at it, you're not going to recognize how it's affected. It's still the best you can do. And in that home domain, you speak a lot in the book about your mom, and there was not that sort of support. And again, I'm really appreciate you sharing that aspect. Can you say a little bit more about that component?
Yes, you were just talking about how so worried about what other people think, and that really epitomizes my mother. She was really worried about what it looked like, what the appearances were, what others might think about her and me by extension and the family. And there was this anxiety that was always running so high. And it really got in the way of her being able to sit with her own pain. And so then she couldn't sit with mine, or she couldn't even see it. It was just too much for her. And I have a lot of compassion for her and the limitation of that. But it was difficult because it meant that I was alone trying to manage a difficult situation. And yet I didn't also want to give up the horses. So I was, choosing in a way to be in that bind. But my mother was very oblivious to it and really just didn't want to see it, even when I brought it really directly to her.
Yeah, and that was in the book and powerfully written. And the idea that you were choosing to go with the horses is very different than people choosing to be abused, right? Yeah. Right? I mean, we hear this all the time, right? Oh, if only I had done this, I shouldn't, Nobody has a right. It's that sense of being powerless. We defend against being powerless by making things up and pretending. If only I had done this. If only I had done that. Shouldn't have done this. We talk about post-traumatic stress. The word that really gets me is the word disorder. And I'm just going to do my editorial part here, That one word, folks, the word disorder that we have really sequestered in psychiatry and social work, it separates people into groups. This group is okay. Not so sure about that group. Attention deficit disorder, major depressive disorder. But the one that gets me the most, Carol, is post-traumatic stress disorder. You got your response to your trauma wrong. Mm-hmm. What is... How did we allow that to happen? And here in this book, nobody has the right to hurt anybody. Nobody has that right. And yet here, you are in a position where, and tell me if I'm way off base, in order to be with what you loved, those horses, you had to tolerate this threat. I'm just really fascinated by that.
Unfortunately, it continues that using perpetrators weaponizing passion, right? Like my passion for horses was weaponized against me. He held all the leverage to it, and whether it's that for me or the gymnasts, right. With Dr. Nasser, or the stories that have come out more recently about professional women's soccer, football. It's when we have a desire and a goal, and it's something that is that important to us, then we kind of, contort ourselves around whatever that situation is. And that's why there's a new organization, Safe Sport, relatively new, that came out to help athletes and others that are in that kind of bind.
Yeah. Well, we're very fortunate that we do have real supporters without any coercion at all, and those are our sponsors. So what I'd like to do is hear from our supporters. We'll be right back. Carol Odell, Girl Groomed. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. And again, we're super grateful for you listening to the Dr. Joe Show. If you have anyone that you think might be a good sponsor, shoot us an email at drjoepodcast@gmail.com. DRJOE podcast@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts about the show, too. We're wondering, are we talking to the trees, or are people really gaining value in this? Please let us know. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Larry, are we back? Larry the Legend is in studio, and we are back with me and Dr. Joe on WATD 95.9 FM here at Broadcast House, Marshfield, Mass., South Shore, Boston.
Yeah. And
talking to a wonderful author about a wonderful story.
Yeah, and we're talking about being groomed, being seduced, not wanting any of that, and yet this sense of being powerless and then being blamed. And Carol, where do you want to go? We've got a few minutes left, but what are you hoping to get across to our readers? What's the message that you're trying to give us here?
Well, one message I hope that people hear is that the past informs who we are, right? It's not like we can just forget about it or put it in a trunk somewhere. It informs who we are, but it doesn't define who we are or who we are becoming. And that feels so important, that it's not that we're broken from things that happen to us. And it's less about really what happens to us as what we do with what happens to us. The narratives we create, or the ways that we take on shame or responsibilities that weren't ever ours to take on. And then if we can really unwind that again gives us some liberation as we move forward.
How does someone find the courage to do that, do you think?
In relationship. I just, most of the trauma that happens to people and to me is done in isolation. And so by being in relationship, by talking about it, by finding trusting people that we can share with and that do see us, that's healing, creating community. We don't heal by ourselves. We heal with others. Mm. And it brings us into the human journey of it all, right? We all have these tendencies to be meaning makers and draw actually sometimes really inaccurate conclusions, especially as kids when we don't have the context for that. And so then having other people reflect something different that our blind spots can't see is part of that too.
And how did the horses then play into this with you personally? Why the horses?
I was just always drawn to horses, and it felt very innate for me to be attracted to them. I think the horses they're strong and yet vulnerable, and they're independent and yet very herd oriented, as I said, and I think that speaks to all of us. It sort of embraces all of those both and qualities that are innately in us. And I think horses know their worth, and we as humans don't always know our innate worth.
That is very true. And even that, though, is an I am. It's the best we can do at that moment. Mm-hmm. But we're influenced by these domains. And that gets us to the two questions that I want to ask you. The first, the I am is basically saying we're always doing the best we can. If we don't like it, we can change it. But we're influenced in responding to the 4 domains. Your home domain, we've been talking about that in this book with your mom. The social domain, which is everything else, certainly talking about that. The I see domain, the way I see myself, the way I think other people see me, also in the book. And then the biological domain of your brain and body. Hungry, tired, but also are you in an active fight, flight, freeze mode? So because the 4 domains interact, a small change can have a big effect. We don't need to change everything. Carol, based on what we're talking about tonight, our topic, what small change can you recommend to our listeners?
What I would recommend is to bring curiosity to ourselves. To be curious about what our thoughts are, to be curious about what was influencing those thoughts, what is the conditioning that's behind those thoughts. Because just because we think it doesn't make it true. And if we can start being open to wondering about where our narratives come from and what's impacting them, I feel like, again, we can learn more about ourselves. Also with curiosity, and this speaks to something you were saying earlier, then we're not judging ourselves, we're not self-shaming, and we're also not blaming others. The curiosity is an open space of interest and inquiry. And if we can hold that state of mind, or at least come back to that, I believe that serves us well.
Yeah, it is much more rewarding to wonder than to worry. Mark, you were nodding your head in great agreement with what Carol was saying when you heard about the curiosity part. So.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Vulnerability and curiosity are the superpowers, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you've been doing as well, Mark. You're saying, maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
Maybe everything I've been thinking all along isn't 100% accurate.
Yeah.
But I love the vulnerability, and I know you mentioned Brene Brown, who's a legend and has a wonderful TED Talk about vulnerability. But how was that while you were writing it? Do you feel stronger now than before?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Our vulnerability is actually our strength, and we lose track of that, right? We don't understand how that works, because it seems such a paradox. But yes, it's very much, I feel much stronger to be out there, because that's who I am, and that's what I have to offer, and I let go of the rest.
Yeah, that vulnerability can be so scary for someone who's been experiencing trauma because they have felt so vulnerable, and yet they are still here. That resilience that so many folks who have had trauma, it is remarkable.
It's a good reminder that we've actually already lived through the hard stuff, and keeping that in mind, I think can be helpful. And I think some of the difficulty, you had spoken to this earlier, Dr. Joe, that we tend to feel like, oh, this makes me a bad person. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't. It's what happened to us, but it's not who we are.
Right. And
if we can keep that in mind, right, then we can hear tough feedback too.
Yes.
And about our behavior, not about our essence.
Yeah. And the reframe of the shame and the guilt is you wouldn't feel these things if you didn't care. And if the fact that we care, that is part of who we are as human beings. It is powerful, and yet there are these predators there, people who will do just what you were talking about, exploit us, and we need to be aware of it, not mirror it, but be aware of it. And with that in mind, let me ask about the second truth of the I am. Everyone's got one. Everyone has an interest through their IC domain in what you think about them, which has an effect on their biological domain, because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. And you are part of someone's home or social domain. So the second truth of the I am, you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Carol Odell, author, what kind of influence do you want to be?
This is the theme of this talk, really, is I want to share my vulnerability, and that is what I have to offer. And hopefully that gives others permission to share their vulnerability, their stories, to, relate to this human journey we're on, to deepen the understanding, to heal ourselves in relationship. That's the piece I'm offering, is my vulnerability.
Yeah. And it is powerful for someone to read this book. I really recommend you guys get it. It's a great book. It's got some dark stuff in it. So, not surprising. And yet throughout it there's this hope. There's this resilience. My wife is also a horse person, has loved them since she was little, and they are remarkable. They're so smart. They can be so kind. It's that relationship that we have with this remarkably, as you say, vulnerable but powerful animal. And wouldn't it be nice to think that that's who we are as well? We can be vulnerable, powerful. We can be part of a group. We can engage others. We can remind them of their value. The stories about, you and during that equine therapy component, when that horse came over and chose you and you were so worried, what if they don't choose me? This is part of who we are as human beings, aren't we?
Yes, we all belong. Not only are we all worthy, but we all belong. And it's so easy to lose track of that from trauma situations or whatever, that we get isolated. But we all are connected. And it was a great reminder that we're connected to other sentient beings, to nature, to each other. That's important.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we are one group. It's called humanity. One group. And we have an opportunity. Whenever you remind someone of their value, you increase your own value. Let's start doing more of that. Carol Odell, Girl Groomed. How are they going to be able to get the book when it comes out?
It's on all the platforms now for pre-order. It's great to support your local independent bookstore, but it's also on Amazon, and it's distributed through Simon & Schuster. So all the general places, and people can go to my website also to see pictures and events and be able to buy it through that as well.
And tell us the website before we go.
The website is Carol Odell, MSW.com.
Great.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. Can't wait to hear what happens next.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much. Thank you both and your I Am approach.
Thank you. Bye. See you guys.